The day my father exchanged vows with Diana marked the start of a personal nightmare I could have never foreseen. I was only 15 when she stepped into our home, cloaked in luxury, designer outfits, pricey fragrances, and a smile that always stopped just short of reaching her eyes. My father, still mourning my mother's passing 2 years earlier, was utterly blind to her real persona. Sophie, she'd coo with syrupy sweetness, always when my father was within hearing range. I really hope we can bond. I know I'll never take your mom's place, but I'd love for us to be close. But as soon as the front door clicked shut behind him, her true face emerged. That kind smile would harden into stone, and her gentle tone would take on a sharp, cutting edge. To Diana, I wasn't family. I was a barrier, an inconvenient presence in the dream life she envisioned. At first, her games were subtle. Items I cherished, photos of my mother, trinkets she had gifted me, treasured pieces of my childhood, started vanishing without explanation. When I confronted her, she gasped with mock concern. "Oh, Sophie, maybe you misplaced them. Teenagers can be so forgetful," she'd say, eyes twinkling with false innocence. Then came the home renovations. Diana persuaded my father that the house needed a fresh touch. And she decided to begin with my room. "She needs a new beginning," Diana announced sweetly, giving me a sly, victorious glance. "We'll make it something special." But when I returned from school one afternoon, I found my room stripped bare, no bed, no desk, no books. Everything had vanished. Diana leaned against the doorframe, inspecting her manicured nails. "Where are my things?" I demanded, panic rising in my chest. "Oh, the garage," she said lightly. "This room's becoming my yoga studio. A woman needs her space, you understand, right?" I ran to my father, desperate. But by then, Diana had spun her web. "Sophie, sweetheart," he murmured, avoiding my gaze. "It's not permanent. Diana needs a quiet place for her yoga. It's for her well-being. You'll be fine in the garage for now." The garage. Damp, cold, cluttered with rusted tools and boxes we hadn't opened in years. Diana had tossed an old mattress in the corner and declared it my new room. No heating, no insulation, just concrete, darkness, and the stale stench of oil. "You don't deserve better," she sneered when my father was away. "You're just a nuisance. Be grateful I don't have him send you to boarding school." I adapted. In the winters, I buried myself beneath every blanket I owned, teeth chattering through sleepless nights. Summers were suffocating, but when I begged for a fan, Diana's voice was dripping with mock concern. "Electricity isn't free, darling," she'd smirk. My father was too consumed with work, and with Diana's carefully curated lies, to notice my misery. When I tried to tell him how she treated me, Diana would dissolve into tears. "She's trying to break us apart," she'd sob into her silk handkerchief. "She just can't accept me. Why can't you just try to get along?" My father would plead, torn between loyalty and guilt. But the final betrayal came on my 18th birthday. Turning 18 should have felt like freedom, a celebration of adulthood. I had just been accepted into several colleges, Columbia University, my dream school, included. My mother had left behind a college fund specifically for my future, a detail Diana always resented. That night, as I passed by their bedroom, I overheard their conversation through the slightly ajar door. "Darling," Diana purred, "I've been thinking about Sophie's college fund. Isn't it a bit extravagant? I mean, what if she drops out? Wouldn't it be more practical to use that money for something we both enjoy, like that beach house in the Hamptons we've talked about?" I waited, heart pounding, for my father to defend me. To remind her that money was my mother's legacy for me. But all I heard was his weary sigh. "You may have a point. Sophie's never been very focused on academics. Maybe a year at community college would be more realistic." Something shattered inside me. That night, after they'd gone to bed, I crept into the main house from the cold, musty garage. I knew exactly where my father kept his documents, in the locked cabinet of his home office. It didn't take long to find the paperwork regarding my education fund. As I suspected, the account was solely in my name, with my mother listed as trustee until I turned 18. Diana had no right to touch it. And now that I was officially an adult, neither did my father. I moved the entire sum into a new bank account, one only I could access. Then, I packed the few belongings I had left, scribbled a short note, and walked out the front door. I didn't look back. The months that followed were brutal. I worked 2 jobs, attended college full-time, and lived in a tiny apartment in a rundown part of the city. The place was barely larger than the garage I had escaped, but this time, the space was mine. No sneering voice. No stolen memories. Just freedom. Diana tried to reach out at first. Voicemails filled with threats, vague warnings of consequences. My father called too, sometimes angry, other times pleading. But I had changed my number, disconnected that chapter of my life like cutting a dead limb. In time, I discovered a passion, and talent, for real estate. I used the last of my college fund and a small loan to purchase a crumbling apartment unit. I renovated it myself, weekends and nights spent scrubbing, painting, fixing. When I sold it, the profit allowed me to buy 2 more. By the time I graduated, I had built a small but growing portfolio. While my classmates were polishing resumes and attending job fairs, I was launching my own company, Phoenix Properties. Diana had tried to bury me in that garage. She'd underestimated me. She thought she was crushing me under her heel, but instead, she lit a fire I refused to let burn out. 10 years passed in a blur of deals, deadlines, and determination. Phoenix Properties, once a dream scratched into the margins of my college notebooks, became one of the most respected luxury real estate firms in New York. I specialized in reclaiming forgotten spaces, abandoned buildings, crumbling estates, and turning them into homes where people could feel secure, respected, and at peace. It was my way of rewriting the narrative I'd been forced into, proof that no matter how dark the beginning, a story could still find light. My latest project was a mansion in the Hamptons. It had once been grand, but years of neglect had turned it into a shell of itself. I purchased it at auction for a fraction of its worth, drawn to its potential, its good bones, as they say. Over the course of a year, I transformed it with care, modernizing it while preserving its original charm. It became not only the crown jewel of my portfolio but also my personal home. A symbol of everything I had built on my own terms. Then, one quiet afternoon, my assistant forwarded me a housekeeping application for the estate. A routine task, until I saw the name. Diana Mitchell. I stared at the file, unable to breathe. Her resume was unimpressive, spotty job history, poor references, a desperate tone in the cover letter. Apparently, her world had crumbled. I'd heard rumors, failed investments, mounting debts, and my father's dwindling pension barely covering rent. They'd been forced to sell the house I once called home. Diana had fallen far. My assistant hesitated. Should I reject it, given the history? I leaned back in my chair, a plan forming. No, schedule the interview, but don't mention who owns the estate. Let her walk into this new world blind. Let her face the empire built by the girl she tried to erase. When the day came, Diana arrived dressed plainly, her expensive tastes reduced to a threadbare coat and scuffed shoes. She didn't recognize me at first. My name wasn't listed anywhere on the paperwork. I let her talk. She spoke carefully, trying to impress, unaware of the silent storm brewing across the desk from her. She talked about being experienced in maintaining large homes, a quick learner, willing to live on site. I interrupted. You're behind 3 months on rent. Your credit cards are maxed. My father's pension is all you have left. Her eyes widened, lips parting in confusion. How do you know that? I smiled coldly. It's my job to know who I'm hiring. She froze. And your first task, I added, leaning forward. The garage. It needs a deep clean. You remember the garage, don't you? Silence stretched. Her face turned pale. The realization hit like a crashing wave. She whispered, Sophie, welcome to my home, Diana. Her voice cracked. I know I hurt you. I was wrong. I'm sorry. Are you sorry for what you did? Or sorry now that you need me? I asked. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. I slid the contract across the table. You'll work 6 days a week, follow all house rules, and live in the staff quarters. You'll be expected to keep this house in pristine condition, just like you once demanded of me. Her hands trembled as she held the pen. And if I say no? She asked, voice barely above a whisper. I own your apartment building, I replied evenly. Refuse this job, and I'll have no choice but to initiate eviction proceedings. Her hand moved slowly, shakily signing the agreement. The woman who once cast me into the shadows had unknowingly walked into the light I had built. And now, it was her turn to answer to me. The months that followed were a slow burn of poetic justice. Diana, who once walked with practiced grace through my childhood home, now wore a plain housekeeper's uniform and scrubbed my marble floors with worn hands. The woman who once mocked my existence now quietly took orders from my staff. She didn't take it well at first. There were signs of defiance, minor, accidents, broken dishes, delayed responses to instructions, but every slip earned her a formal warning. I made it clear, this wasn't a place for rebellion. She would either adapt, or she would leave, with nowhere to go. Eventually, she stopped fighting. The attitude dissolved into quiet obedience. She followed the rules, rose early, kept the estate immaculate, and responded with a polite, "Yes, ma'am," to even the smallest request. The cruel, smirking stepmother of my youth was gone, replaced by someone tired, humbled, and maybe, starting to understand. Then, one night, I found her sitting alone in the garage. It had remained untouched over the years. I kept it just as it was, not out of spite, but as a reminder of where I'd started. The cold concrete floor, the rusted shelves, the smell of oil and dust, it was the place where the worst parts of my story had taken root. She didn't hear me at first. Her shoulders shook silently. When she finally noticed me standing there, she looked up with red, swollen eyes. "I used to make you sleep here," she whispered, her voice hollow. "In this cold, empty place. How could I have done that?" For the first time, I didn't see fear or pride in her face, I saw guilt. Real, aching guilt, not because she was suffering, but because she had made someone else suffer. I walked toward her slowly. "Stand up," I said quietly. She did, brushing her tears away, trying to compose herself. "You've done your job well," I told her. "Starting tomorrow, you'll move into the East Wing. Proper room, private bathroom, heating. You've earned it." She blinked, stunned. "Why, after everything I did?" "Because I'm not you." My voice was steady, calm. "I won't let your cruelty become the mold I live in. You taught me what it meant to be powerless, yes, but you also taught me how dangerous it is to wield power without compassion." Something in her broke then, not from pain, but from recognition. She nodded slowly. "Thank you," she whispered. "For this, for the chance." And from that moment, our dynamic shifted. She still worked for me. But she did so with renewed energy, not out of obligation, but almost with a sense of redemption. She became known among the staff for her attention to detail, her dedication, her humility. The same woman who once sneered at my presence now ensured the home I built gleamed with pride. Exactly 1 year later, I called her into my office. She entered cautiously, no doubt remembering the last time she'd sat in that chair. "You've exceeded expectations," I told her plainly. "The head housekeeper position at my new Manhattan property is open. It comes with a salary increase and a private apartment. Would you be interested?" Tears welled again, but these weren't from shame. They were from surprise, and perhaps hope. "You'd trust me with that?" she asked, her voice shaking. "You've earned it," I said simply. "People can change, Diana. You've proven that." She nodded, taking a deep breath. "I know I can never undo the past. I'll carry that with me forever. But I understand now. I was wrong. You deserved so much more." I nodded slowly. "Yes, I did. But this isn't about what you took from me. It's about what you're building now." And with that, we closed the door on the past, not with revenge, but with renewal. As Diana stepped out of my office that day, I watched her retreating figure and thought back to the 15-year-old girl who used to cry herself to sleep in a freezing garage, wrapped in every blanket she could find. That girl had survived, not just the cold, but the cruelty, the rejection, and the unbearable loneliness. She hadn't just escaped, she'd risen. My business, Phoenix Properties, had become more than a company. It was the physical embodiment of every promise I made to myself in that dark, oil-stained garage. A promise that I would one day create safe, beautiful homes for people who deserved better. A promise that no one else would feel as unseen and unwanted as I once had. Each project I completed was a personal victory. Every home I restored, every space I transformed was a message: you matter. You belong. You deserve comfort and dignity. And Diana, she accepted the head housekeeper role at the Manhattan development with solemn gratitude. Over the next months, she became a respected figure among the staff. Gone were the days of bitterness or defiance. Instead, she led with a quiet authority, driven not by power but by purpose. Sometimes we'd have coffee together in the mornings. The conversations were never about the past, not in detail. But there was an unspoken understanding in the space between us, a mutual acknowledgement of where we'd been and what we had become. It wasn't forgiveness in the conventional sense. It was something deeper, a recognition that healing sometimes takes the shape of second chances. One crisp autumn morning, I passed by the old garage again. I kept it just as it was, untouched, unchanged. It wasn't about sentimentality or nostalgia. It was about memory. That space, once my prison, was now my monument. A symbol of transformation. I stood at the threshold and remembered Diana's old words, "You don't deserve better." How wrong she had been. Everyone deserves better. Better love, better shelter, better treatment, a better chance. Even those who once tried to deny it to others. That cold, forgotten garage had been the crucible in which I was forged. It had taught me pain, but also perseverance. Humiliation, but also humility. And when the time came to choose between vengeance and compassion, I chose the path that let me stand tall, not just as a successful entrepreneur, but as someone who could wield power without repeating the cruelty that once defined my life. Today, Phoenix Properties spans the country. My team and I continue to develop spaces that offer safety, elegance, and warmth. My portfolio includes everything from cozy bungalows to grand estates, but the principle is always the same: home is where you feel seen, safe, and valued. Diana still manages my Manhattan estate. Her staff respects her. She lives in a modest apartment on site, maintains order, and trains new hires with patience and kindness. She's a far cry from the woman who once ruled a teenage girl's life with passive-aggressive cruelty and fake affection. And sometimes, just sometimes, we talk about the past in soft, indirect ways. "I never thought I'd end up here," she once said, sipping her tea on the balcony. "Working for the girl I tried to break." "You didn't break me," I replied quietly. "You gave me a reason to become unbreakable." She nodded, her eyes distant but wet. "You're not the girl from the garage anymore." "No," I said, "I'm the woman who owns the house. And the garage. And the whole damn block." She laughed softly. And for once, it wasn't hollow. Life has a strange way of evening out. Some people learn through love. Others through loss. Diana had learned by falling hard, and by being given the grace to rise again. And I had learned that the best kind of revenge isn't vengeance at all. It's building something so beautiful, so solid, so meaningful, that the people who tried to break you have no choice but to stand in awe. My story didn't end in the garage. It began there. And every home I build is a new chapter. A new story. A new beginning. For everyone who ever felt like they didn't deserve better, this is for you. You do. Always.